The OCD and Anxiety Podcast by Robert James Coaching. Hello and welcome to the OCD and Anxiety Podcast, where we explore how to have a more positive relationship with anxiety disorders, taking back control so that you can start living the life you choose and not the one chosen by your fears.
Hello and welcome to episode 369. I hope that wherever you are, and there does seem to be a lot of different countries represented in terms of the listeners of this podcast. So wherever you are this morning, I hope that you are having a great morning. And if you are, though, struggling with OCD or anxiety, as you might know, you can get a free session with me. To get that, you can head over to my website, robertjamescoaching.com. There you can book in for that free session directly, or if you prefer, you can send me a message to let me know about what you're struggling with. In today's podcast, I'm going to be talking about the importance of motivation and finding motivation when it comes to overcoming OCD. Obviously, sometimes it can get very frustrating. And we can feel like, we can't find that energy to do the exposure activities or to practice the new kind of diffusion techniques or whatever it is that we're doing to try to manage the OCD. So finding motivation, and it may surprise you actually how I'm going to talk about the kind of ways in which we can do that. But, it's a really important area to discuss. As always, if you find the podcast helpful, it'd be great if you could follow and like on Instagram. The podcast is also now on YouTube. There is Patreon as well. So if you're interested in signing up for Patreon, you can ask me direct questions there. You can ask me, about podcast episodes that you would like to hear about, and I will do them personally for you on the Patreon. So if you're interested in signing up for that, you can follow the link in the show notes. And that's about it, guys. I really hope that you enjoy. If you have any questions, do please let me know. Many thanks. So today's episode is obviously all about motivation. And I think the frustrating thing with OCD and motivation is, it's not that you haven't been trying hard to solve the problem of OCD. It's normally quite the opposite. People are actually expending an enormous amount of energy to try to fix it. And this was certainly the case for me when I was really struggling with it. I was problem solving all day long. I was trying to reassure myself and trying to have certainty about things because, before I really knew that I had OCD and before I knew how to manage it, I thought that was the kind of best strategy. Even when I did know that I had OCD, of course, it was still very tempting. And very often I would still go down the rabbit hole of ruminating, of problem solving, of performing compulsions, because that is the very nature of OCD. This is what it does. We know it doesn't make sense, but we can't quite help the fact that we really want to have certainty, to kind of feel safe, to feel that we've figured these things out and that things are going to be okay, that the anxiety isn't going to come up and ruin things for us or make things too uncomfortable. And so we keep performing the compulsions, and, we're actually working really hard. We're working overtime because we're doing all of the things in our lives that we need to do. And at the same time, we're actually kind of, performing all these compulsions and doing all the stuff that, most people in our lives are completely unaware of. So often OCD is this kind of silent problem that we're experiencing. Nobody else really knows what we're going through. Internally, there's this huge battle going on. And actually, we're having to kind of motivate ourselves in a way to kind of do that. So it's not that you're unmotivated. It's not that you're not working hard if you have OCD. Most probably it's the opposite. You are working hard, but you're putting your energy and your kind of resources into the wrong kind of things. So I wanted to share a quote actually today by the famous American salesman, Zig Ziglar. Bit of a random quote, but why not? So here's the quote. People often say that motivation doesn't last. Well, neither does bathing. That's why we recommend it daily. And, I think it's quite a funny and helpful quote because it just reminds us of the importance of actually regularly paying attention to motivation and, recognizing that it's not something that you can just do for 1 or 2 days. But as I was just talking about, we might actually need to be paying attention to it with a certain kind of quality in the long term to make sure that our motivation is actually being put into the right kind of things. As I was just talking about, it's very easy, even if you are feeling motivated, to put that energy into unhelpful stuff when it comes to OCD, to trying to problem solve it, to trying to outthink it or outmaneuver it, to outsmart the OCD, to just keep on performing compulsions because that feels like it's kind of keeping the anxiety at bay. But we know if we're doing that, then actually, that's wasted motivation. So actually, we need to pay attention to motivation. We need to build motivation, but we also need to be smart in how we are applying it and recognizing the kind of pitfalls that OCD creates for us all day long. It's so easy to put that energy into unhelpful things. So first of all, it's just important to recognize that. Now, secondly, you might actually just be struggling with motivation, full stop, that you're just feeling a bit down because, OCD's been going on and you feel that it's just really difficult and you're not making progress and you're frustrated and you're stuck in that cycle. And if that's you, then of course my heart goes out to you. It's a really difficult place to be in. So I think when we're in this kind of place, it's so important that we reach out for help from trusted people that are close to us, that we don't keep that burden to ourselves. Sometimes you just need to try to, speak with somebody else and see if you can find some inner strength from somewhere, to be able to speak up to somebody, because often just reaching out and opening up can help us to find some new reserves or some new inner strength that maybe we didn't realize was there. Sharing is so important when it comes to this kind of stuff. But also, we need to find ways to get inspired. And I think, other things that are important are to kind of explore perhaps other people who have struggled with OCD, who are, doing much better with it. I really don't like to talk about myself in those kind of terms in a way, because I really don't like to big myself up. Of course, I've struggled a lot with OCD in the past. My 20s were an absolute disaster because of OCD. It was really difficult. I felt like this is a time where I should be enjoying myself and having a great time. And there I was just really struggling with OCD all day long. And, it wasn't really a fun time at all. It was just a struggle. But fortunately, I did get through that. And although I would like to point out that, it is an ongoing process to manage that OCD, to kind of keep it in its place. Fortunately, today, I'm in a much better place with it. And that's me and my kind of story with it. But of course, there's so many people out there who have overcome OCD. If you go online onto Instagram, there's lots of, therapists who've, maybe they've struggled with OCD themselves and they've become therapists. There's all sorts of different books out there, people who are talking about their experiences of overcoming OCD. There's a guy called Jeff Bell who has a really good book about that. There's all sorts of different books out there that are really worth kind of reading, kind of, people kind of giving a bit of an autobiography of their experiences with OCD. And then there's also kind of more, books that are kind of more autobiographical, but from a wider sense. They're not really focusing on maybe OCD and anxiety, but they're talking about struggle in general, the struggle that they've maybe had in their lives of having to overcome obstacles and, finding the inner strength to be able to do that. Personally, for me, one book that I found really moving and really helpful was Nelson Mandela's Long Walk to Freedom, where he, obviously a really inspirational person, somebody who had an incredible life, but had to really struggle and get through very difficult times in order to achieve all these things in his life. And, for me, somebody like that is very inspiring and motivating. And these kinds of people and stories in particular can really help us, to kind of find meaning and purpose and motivation. So if you're looking for some motivation, it might be worth, seeking out some interesting autobiographies, real life stories of people overcoming difficulties. It can be a really helpful way to kind of find that motivation. Another thing that I want to talk about then when it comes to this topic is recognizing that motivation can only take us so far, that it is a kind of finite resource. And although, we need to check in with ourselves and keep recognizing, am I pushing myself today? Am I taking steps towards my values and my goals and all that kind of stuff? We also need to recognize that it is limited. You can't just keep pushing and pushing and pushing yourself all day long. You're going to get tired. You're going to run out of energy. And, if you're pushing yourself too hard, you're going to end up getting exhausted. You're going to end up getting stressed. And when that happens, it's more likely that OCD is going to creep back in. We need to have those inner reserves to manage the OCD and to be living our lives well. And so, it's also very, very important to point this out, that motivation can only take us so far. And something that has been really, really helpful for me is actually building in over time different habits that actually support me, my mental health, my physical health, in order to have the energy and the focus and the motivation to kind of be there more automatically. So when we create a habit, effectively, we just do things more easily. For example, this podcast, I do it twice a week. It's just something that I habitually do now. And, when I first started doing that, well, it was a real effort for the first 6 weeks to 2 months. It was something that I had to really force myself to do because I was still developing that habit. So I had to keep motivating myself each day to do it. But over time, after a few months of doing that, it really just becomes something that you just do. And so it isn't so hard anymore. You don't have to motivate yourself so much. You don't need to use up so much energy to do it. And I think it's the same when it comes to, to managing OCD. When we get into the habit of not avoiding things, of taking on real life exposures when they come up in our lives and actually allowing the flood of difficult emotions to come in, with that strength and resolve to know that those difficult emotions will move on again if we just allow them to be there in the background. Of practicing refocusing our attention like we do in acceptance commitment therapy, putting our attention back onto our values and the things that we care about. When you start making habits out of those types of things, then of course, OCD over time becomes easier to manage because those kinds of behaviors become your new habitual way of being. And this is really kind of what it's all about. If we just kind of apply, exposure for, a few weeks and then kind of give up on it and say, oh, thank you, Bruno. Thanks for that. Sorry, it's just my dog, Bruno, being a pain. So yeah, you might give up on it and just say, well, I'm feeling better now. I've done the hard work, so I don't need to do that anymore. I can go back to just kind of playing it easy and not leaning into my discomfort anymore. Just going back to avoiding difficult emotions again. Unfortunately, that's not going to be very beneficial in the long term. And you haven't quite got into the habit of just kind of dealing with difficult emotions and, and things that come up in our day-to-day lives. in a positive way. And really, that doesn't mean that you have to do, specific kind of contrived exposure activities like every day for the rest of your life. Really, what I'm talking about is more of this general approach or general way of being in life, where we recognize the things that we don't like, the things that we fear, the things that make us uncomfortable, but we make a habit of saying, well, I'm not going to avoid those things anymore. As an ongoing process of exposure, in a way, I'm going to be living my life, doing the things that are important to me, living by my values, despite my fears being there in the background. And when we can do that and we really lean into that, then of course that's a kind of insurance policy that will keep us on the right path with OCD. And we don't need to have quite so much motivation when we have made a habit out of those things. So whether it's habits that are, to do with your goals and your values, things that are very interesting to you, your hobbies, or whether it's more specifically about, actual OCD techniques and things that you apply that you really want to kind of cement into your daily practice, or even it can be things like meditation that inadvertently really help us when it comes to OCD and anxiety. All of these things we can develop into kind of habitual activities that really keep us on the right path, that keep our focus where it needs to be, that help us to kind of keep moving in the right direction. OCD just wants to take us off that path. It wants us to play it safe. It wants us to kind of, to be stuck, to be not living our lives by our values. And that's why it's so important that we just recognize that and that we take positive action to get us moving in the right direction. So there we go, guys. I really hope that you enjoyed that one today about motivation. If you have any questions at all about anything I've spoken about, do please let me know. And I will see you next time.
Just a quick reminder that if you want to get a free session, all you need to do to get that is to head over to my website, www.robertjamescoaching.com. And there you can leave me a message and we can arrange the free session. And now just a quick reminder of my disclaimer. Any information that you view on my website, Instagram page, Facebook group, or anywhere else online, or any information that you listen to on the podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for actual medical or mental health advice from a doctor, psychologist, or any other medical or mental health professional.